Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new here. My name is Emma and I cover primarily unsolved cases on this channel, and today we'll be covering the disappearance of 8-year-old Nicole Morin, who left her mother's penthouse apartment to meet a friend to go swimming and never made it down to the lobby. Before we jump into the case, I would just like to make a disclaimer that I don't mean any disrespect to anyone who I mention in this video, and that all the information I discuss today is compilation of things I found on the internet, as well as in archived newspaper articles from the time of Nicole's disappearance. My goal with this video is to raise awareness about Nicole and about her story, and hopefully see closure brought to her case one day. Now let's get on to the video. Nicole Louise Morin was born on April 1st, 1977 to parents Jeanette and Art Morin. Her parents didn't think they were ever going to have children together. Nicole's mother actually had a son from a previous marriage who lived in California, and from what I can gather, she never planned on having any more children. However, when 12 years into their marriage, they found out they were pregnant with Nicole, they were ecstatic, and her father described her as an absolute treasure and the light of their lives. In 1983, Nicole's parents decided to separate, and Nicole stayed living in their condominium with her mother at 627 The West Mall in Etobicoke, Toronto, Ontario, which is in Canada. This was a complex that they lived in of 4 separate condominium buildings, but there were really only 2 physical buildings, and within each building was 2 separate addresses. So I'll put a picture on the screen so you can gauge that a little bit better, because that does come into play in the case a little bit. So Nicole lived at 627, but there was also another address number that shared the same physical building as them but had its own separate entrance. So it looks like just 2 buildings from the outside, but there are actually 4 separate addresses, if that makes sense. Hopefully I'm able to explain that well enough for you guys. The neighborhood that they lived in was made up of a lot of single-story post-war bungalows, townhouses, and apartment complexes like theirs. So there were a lot of kids, a lot of young families in that area around the time of this case while Nicole was growing up in through the late 70s and the early 80s. I do want to give you a little bit of background information about the summer that Nicole disappeared before we move forward, so you can understand the circumstances around the day of her disappearance a little bit better. Nicole was 8 years old that summer, and living in such a large condo complex, she had plenty of friends available to play with every day. There were 3 pools for residents of the building, so Nicole spent many days swimming with her friends and bouncing back and forth between each other's apartments. Her mom ran a daycare service out of their condo, so on weekdays when her mom was busy watching over the children in her care, Nicole was able to go to other children's apartments and spend a lot of time with her friends in the pools or on the complex's playground area. This summer was actually the first summer that Nicole was able to leave the apartment by herself. Her mother said that prior to this, she was actually a very small child and she was unable to reach the elevator button for their floor. So since they lived on the penthouse floor of the apartment, when you got in the elevator, there would be all of the buttons and theirs would be the one at the very top. So prior to that, Nicole couldn't reach that button, so she was never allowed to leave the apartment by herself because she wouldn't be able to get back upstairs. And lastly, just because I thought it was a cute fact and shows a little bit of Nicole's personality, she had a pet rat that she had named Bluebell. On the morning of July 30th, 1985, around 10:30 a.m., Nicole's mother sent her down to the lobby to collect their mail for the day, which I'm sure Nicole would have been ecstatic about. I know when I was getting to Nicole's age and my mom would send me out on an errand just down to the shop down the road or even across the street to borrow something from our neighbors, I felt like I had such a big duty to do, and so I'm sure Nicole kind of felt the same way and was really happy to have the freedom to be able to do something simple for her mother, like go down to the lobby and get their mail. When Nicole returned back upstairs, she began to get ready to meet her friend Jennifer Mazeppa, who was 9 at the time, to go swimming in one of the complex's supervised pools that day. Around 11 o'clock that morning, Jennifer buzzed up to the Morin's apartment to let Nicole know that she was in the lobby and she was ready to go swimming, and Nicole said she would be right down. When Nicole left her apartment that morning, she was dressed in a reddish-orange bathing suit with stripes on it, a green headband, and red Converse shoes. She was also carrying a plastic bag that had in it a peach-colored blanket, a purple towel, and swimming goggles. I also read in one source that there was the possibility that she could be carrying or wearing a pair of blue shorts. However, I did only see this in one source, so you can take that bit of information with a grain of salt. There were 3 elevators in the building that Nicole could have taken to get down to the lobby to meet Jennifer, and while Jennifer waited for her friend, she saw one of the elevators go to the penthouse floor twice, make several stops in the meantime, but when that elevator got to the lobby, there was nobody on it. And after about 15 minutes of waiting, Jennifer buzzed up to the Morin's apartment again, asking if Jennifer was on her way, and her mother assured her that she had already left, she should have been there by now, and that they probably just missed each other. So her mother advised that Jennifer go check the pool area for Nicole or the playground area, and she was sure she would be out there. Around 3 p.m. that day, Jeanette and Morin called over to Jennifer's apartment looking to speak to her daughter and was told by Jennifer's parents that Jennifer hadn't actually seen Nicole that day. Jeanette was a little bit concerned, of course, but didn't automatically assume the worst. She assumed that Nicole had probably met up with some other friends and was playing in somebody else's apartment, or was still down in the swimming and playground area. Once all of her daycare children were picked up for the day, Jeanette started looking for Nicole herself and searched for a couple hours, asked some neighbors if she'd seen her. She also called Nicole's father and double-checked that he didn't have their daughter. And then around 6 p.m., when nobody had seen Nicole, the superintendent of the building called the police. At the time of her disappearance, Nicole Morin was 4 feet tall, weighed 52 pounds, with brown hair, brown eyes, a medium tan complexion, and she had a birthmark on her forehead near her hairline. She had pierced ears and a center gap in her teeth. Police took Nicole's disappearance seriously from the beginning and set up a roadblock immediately, stopping all cars coming in or out of the apartment complex, and they also set up a $1,000 reward right off the bat. The initial police search consisted of mounted horsemen, marine units, helicopters, foot patrols, and a mobile broadcasting system where they put broadcasting speakers on top of police vehicles and drove them around the area, giving descriptions of Nicole and letting everybody know that she was missing. Divers immediately dragged all nearby waterways. Police searched all parks, ravines, creeks, and wooded areas in the 2-mile radius of Nicole's home address, and an Ontario provincial police helicopter scanned the tops of buildings. Foot patrols went door to door with pictures of Nicole, which brought forward some initial leads. There were some building residents who reported seeing Nicole in the apartment complex's playground areas around 2:30 p.m. the day of her disappearance, and a woman who said she had ridden the elevator down to the lobby with Nicole that morning and seen Nicole get off before the woman carried on down to the underground parking area. However, these eyewitness accounts were eventually discredited by police. I do want to say here that I have read a lot of things online about people speculating that the police did not properly search the building in this case, but after doing some deep dives into newspaper archives from the time that Nicole disappeared, I have to say that I disagree with the idea that the police didn't thoroughly search the building. If someone didn't answer their door when they knocked on the unit, police had permission to take the door off the hinges and enter the unit on their own, which they did at least 14 times between the 4 buildings. Sergeant Cullen of the Metro Toronto Police, which is what the Toronto Police Force was called at the time, said that the police searching in the individual apartments checked everything from washers and dryers to cedar chests and bags of garbage. In addition, the building's roof, elevator shafts, basement, sump pumps, and drains were thoroughly searched on more than one occasion in the search for Nicole. Okay, so my camera battery just died and I had to switch batteries, so if the positioning looks a little bit different, that's why. By August 1st, the Toronto Star, Toronto's largest daily newspaper, had printed over 6,000 posters of Nicole. These posters featured a picture of the missing girl along with an anonymous tip number and the phrase, "Have you seen Nicole?" 200 of these posters went up in her immediate neighborhood, with many more around the Greater Toronto area in neighborhoods, subway stations, and on the side of newspaper and police vehicles. As in most cases of missing children, Nicole's parents were both immediately suspects in her disappearance, but were later ruled out by police. Following their separation in 1983, Jeanette and Art were involved in a court case over support payments. And for a while, Art believed that someone who had known that they were having problems had arranged to abduct Nicole and even suspected that his daughter had known about it. In searches of her room following her disappearance, a notebook was found where Nicole had written that she was going to disappear, which is what sparked this theory for Art. However, most people, including the majority of investigators on this case, believe that this note was just a coincidence, something written by the imagination of an 8-year-old. From her bedroom, police also took hair from her brush, lifted fingerprints, and took a plaster cast of her hand that she had made as a school art project in 2nd grade. On August 1st, which was the day of the first paper printed following Nicole's disappearance, the feature article on the front page of the Toronto Star read, "I know someone's killed her, mother of missing girl says." Jeanette was sure that if her daughter was somewhere alive, she would have called home. 2 weeks before her disappearance, Nicole and her mother had been watching a TV show about missing children, and after discussing it and discussing the topic, Jeanette had taught her daughter how to dial long distance. So nowadays we can just call somebody long distance on our phones and it automatically knows that that's a long distance number and just puts us through to that person. However, in 1985, there were specific long distance codes that you needed. I know when I was little, we had a really long, it must have been at least 12 numbers that you had to punch into the phone first before you could dial the phone number that you wanted to call if it was a long distance number. So I'm assuming it was something like that, and Nicole's mother had taught her how to dial long distance to call home in case she was ever somewhere where she needed to reach them. Nicole's parents believed that she had likely been attacked in the elevator on her way to the lobby, where she had no way to escape, and this theory was soon adopted by police as well. On August 1st, the same day as that article, there were 3 other articles in the Toronto Star all about Nicole's disappearance. So the entire city of Toronto was looking for this little girl. On August 2nd, the police asked to speak to anybody who would have been in or around Nicole's building on the day that she disappeared. They stated they were looking to speak to employees of 2 delivery companies who had delivered items to the complex around the time that Nicole had left her apartment. There were also sightings of an unknown woman on the penthouse floor of the building about 45 minutes before Nicole disappeared. This woman has not been identified to this day, actually, leaving many to speculate that there is the possibility of her being involved in Nicole's disappearance. This woman was described as being white, about 35 years old, and 5'5" tall, slender with a fair complexion, and holding a notebook. The police thought that they had a break in the case about a week into the investigation when a green headband was found in a search of a field. But it turned out that after bringing the headband to her mother, she confirmed that this was not the headband her daughter had been wearing the day that she disappeared. The general public was also keeping their eyes open, with a call coming in about a pair of red shoes someone had seen on the side of the Gardiner Expressway in Toronto. However, this too turned out to be a dead end when the police recovered the shoes and they were found to be of an adult size. On August 2nd, an article in the Toronto Star confirmed that the police were going on the theory that Nicole was abducted in the elevator as she made her way down to the lobby. In their search of the building, the police even used architectural blueprints to make sure that there were no sealed off areas of the building that they hadn't known about, or any areas that just weren't really visible during a routine search. On August 4th, police announced that all known sex offenders in the area had been cleared of being involved in the disappearance. 2 days later, on August 6th, Nicole's parents increased the reward for information on her disappearance from $1,000 to $50,000. One of the large-scale outdoor searches for Nicole took place in a field near Pearson International Airport, not far from Nicole's address. The search turned up a bag with a black pair of pants and a black shirt in it, as well as a newspaper from the day following Nicole's disappearance that had her picture on the front page. When researching this case, my mind kept coming back to this bag of clothes, and I wonder if this is still something that police have in their evidence. And if they do, I'm curious if it's able to be tested for Nicole's DNA, or for any DNA for that matter. It's possible the clothes are no longer in police custody or are unable to be tested due to degraded samples, or that there's not even any samples on the clothing to start with. But if they are in police custody, I think it would be a really interesting lead to follow. That's just my own speculation and thought process though, so just something to think about if you're interested. 100-man task force assigned to Nicole's disappearance continued to follow down tips for months, but not a single one led to a viable lead. And in March of 1986, the task force was officially disbanded and the number of officers on the case was decreased to 7. There simply weren't enough leads coming in for there to be so many officers on the case. Later in 1986, Morin, Nicole's father, actually hired a private investigator to look into his daughter's disappearance. He hoped that this investigator, who specialized in missing children, would be able to turn up a lead the police were unable to. But ultimately, nothing came of this investigation either. In 1988, 3 years after her disappearance, Nicole's parents officially divorced and had to sell the penthouse condo that Nicole and her mother had been living in at the time of her disappearance. Something interesting that I came across in my research that I thought was worth mentioning here, although the police say it's unrelated, is that in the same complex that Nicole lived in, 2 years following her disappearance, a 30-year-old woman in the same condo complex was strangled to death in her own apartment. As I said, the police stated at the time that they didn't believe this was connected at all to Nicole's disappearance, but I just thought I would mention it here just in case. So now we'll talk about the things that have happened in this case in the decades since Nicole went missing. Many age progressions have been done of Nicole over the years to show what she would look like at different ages, and I'll put some of them on the screen here so you can take a look. In 2014, police searched a property near Barrie, Ontario after a tip from the public came in following a reenactment video of Nicole's disappearance that aired for the 29th anniversary of her disappearance. But nothing was found in the search of this property either. I actually want to talk about the reenactment videos here, and yes, videos, I know I just mentioned one. There are actually two. There was one that was made in 2007 and one that was made in 2014. The one that aired in 2007 showed Nicole and her friend Jennifer to be much older than they actually were. It showed them to be at least 10, older I would say. They looked more to be pre-teenagers in the video. That one is a little bit difficult to find footage of, but if I can find any, I will insert it here for you. And that video showed Nicole's friend living somewhere else and then needing to come into the building. In that video, you know how often in an apartment building you come in one set of doors, there's like a buzzer panel there, and then there's another set of doors that once somebody buzzes you in, those doors unlock and you can go into the lobby. So in the 2007 reenactment, that's the sort of setup it was, and it showed Nicole's friend getting buzzed into the building and then waiting in the lobby for a while before leaving. However, in the 2014 reenactment, the girls were much, much younger, a lot closer to the age that Nicole was when she disappeared. And in that video, it shows that the friend is already in the lobby when she arrives at the building. And people put a lot of weight into the fact that in the one video, Nicole's friend is outside the building, and then in the later video, she's inside the building. I personally don't hold that much to it. I think that whoever made the first reenactment video just probably did not have all of the police information, and when they heard that her friend lived in another building, they thought she would have to come in like that. However, as we talked about at the beginning of this video, my understanding of the complex is that within each building there are 2 separate buildings, and so I think it's quite possible that whether her friend lived in her building or in another building, she was able to access the lobby of the building and then buzzed up to Nicole, not to be let in, but just to let her know that she was ready to go swimming and that she was waiting in the lobby for her. I don't think there's really any sort of conspiracy going on with the videos here, which is what some people think on web sleuths and Reddit, and they could be right, but personally I think that the 2007 reenactment just wasn't that accurate, so in 2014 the police decided to make a more appropriate reenactment and release that to the public instead. Sadly, Jeanette Morin passed away in 2007 from a heart attack, never knowing what happened to her daughter on that summer morning in 1985. Morin is still alive today, and he holds on to hope that his daughter is out there somewhere alive and well. However, he keeps out of the media spotlight for the most part. If Nicole Louise Morin is alive today, she is 42 years old and likely looks similar to this composite. Now, that's all I have on the case of Nicole Louise Morin. In my opinion, this case is absolutely baffling and should be receiving much more coverage than it has in the true crime community. I believe that somebody who lived at 627 the West Mall in 1985 knows what happened to Nicole, and that it will just take that person coming forward with a little bit of information to crack open this case and hopefully bring closure to her father. Sadly, I personally do not believe that Nicole is still alive. I believe that she was probably killed shortly after she disappeared that day, but it is still incredibly important to find out what happened to her and recover any remains that exist in order to bring closure to her father and to the investigators and friends and family who have wondered for decades what's happened to this young girl. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you like this sort of content, and I will see you next time. Bye!